Hello and welcome to Proximity Malt's Instagram Live session with Dale West. We are talking with Dale West, who is the founder and CEO of Proximity Malt. Dale brings 30 years of malt industry experience to his leadership role in Proximity. We'll talk about his experience in the industry, how Proximity Malt came to be. We'll discuss important steps of developing a sustainable supply chain of premium grain varieties which are meant for craft brewing, and then we'll focus on the practical aspects of Proximity's focus on supply chain efficiency and why it matters to brewers. So thanks, Dale, for coming in and giving us this time. Could you tell us a bit about how your career evolved? Where did you start and how did you come to be where you are today?
Well, it's a long story and I don't think we want to go that far back, but my background is in agriculture. I have a degree in ag business, and when I graduated from college I jumped right into the ag industry. Started with PB Conagra and worked with them for about 8 years in grain origination, grain elevator management, and merchandising. And that's really how I got started in the malting industry, as I was trading barley and got to know the malting industry and actually got hired by my first job in the malting industry was with Frederick Malt.
Excellent. What was the idea behind creating a new malt company? One of the first full-scale malting companies that was created in the last 100 years or so?
Yeah, I think the impetus behind the idea for Proximity Malt was really the craft brewing industry and the changes that were evolving with the craft brewing industry and the brewing industry as a whole. If you go back years ago, we started with regional breweries, which had their own regional malt plants. Some of them had their own malt plants with the brewery. We're going back 70 years. And then the brewing industry went through a consolidating period where everything kind of consolidated down. So you went from local, regional to national. And with the brewing industry, the malting industry consolidated as well. We've gone full circle, and the industry has, and now you have over 8,000 craft breweries located throughout the whole U.S., spread out throughout the continent, and the supply chain and the malting industry dynamics have changed, and that was really the driver behind Proximity Malt, the idea behind Proximity Malt.
Excellent. We talk about Proximity Malt as being a new generation, full-scale malting company with 2 regional locations. What does that? Can you unpack that? What does that mean? What does it mean to be first generation?
Well, first generation is it really, as I mentioned before, we've really come full circle in the brewing industry. So what we're doing is trying to evolve with the craft brewing and the brewing industry as a whole, and that is bringing the maltster, the malt plant, and the supply chain closer to the regions that we operate in. And to us, that's a little different than what the current model was or the previous model was.
Why is it important to be full scale?
A full scale allows you to bring the scope and the size, the scale to the business, so that it's sustainable. Right? If you look at the traditional malt supply, and then you look at the craft maltsters, I think we fit in the middle to where we can be sustainable. We have enough size to where we can have a meaningful impact on the ag community and on the brewing community.
Okay. And why is regional? Why is that important?
To bring it closer, to bring the maltster closer to not only the grower but also the brewer, and to have that collaboration between the grower, maltster, and brewer, I think is key to our strategy and key to our success.
And is that's how Proximity differentiates ourselves between the legacy maltsters?
That, I think, it boils down to, in my mind, 3 different things. It's size. It's if you look at Proximity, you can fit about 18 of our plants into, say, a Rars plant in Shakopee in terms of scale. So we're much smaller in terms of scale. It's location. It's where the plants are located relative to the markets that we're serving. And it comes down to focus. It's with that singular focus on the craft craft brewing industry and focused on developing products and originating specialty grains for the craft brewing industry. We're able to really focus our attention on that.
Excellent. And then how are we different from craft maltings?
We're, it's the other side of the spectrum. It comes down to pretty much the same thing. It's size, its scope, and its consistency. Our size is such that we can bring some scale to the ag community that we're operating in. Each one of our plants is about 25,000 tons, so combined we're 50,000 tons. We're too large to be a craft malt company. I think the top end limit for a craft malt company is around 10,000 tons. And I think the average, if you look at the average size of a craft maltster, they're probably somewhere in that 500-ton range, which gets the local aspect of it, but the sustainability is difficult in that being able to sustain for the ag community year over year. So we have the size to bring that sustainability to it. We're located in regions that we feel are sustainable in terms of origination and also in terms of brewery density. And then lastly would be focus. Our focus is on 100% malt brewers and originating specialty grains and focusing on the grains that work for our customers.
Excellent. A little bit, kind of taking it a little bit further as we talk about the importance of grain variety to the grower, the maltster, and the brewer. You had commented on we're focusing on the all malt craft brewers. How did that variety selection did it?
Yeah, there's two things. One is just that, is looking at what is it that the craft maltster or craft brewer is looking for in terms of their malt, what profile they're looking for. They're looking for a more moderate enzymatic profile. So we've gone out and selected varieties that have that package, as well as introducing winter barley varieties into non-traditional regions, malting barley growing regions, to have that diversity. And those varieties, because they stew over the winter and they're cover crop, they tend to be lower protein. So in the regions that we've selected for our plants, they're traditional, low protein, and are well suited for European type varieties, which is what we're working with.
Absolutely. Can you talk about the flexibility maybe that winter barley brings, not just to ourselves but also to our grower partners?
Yeah, and it's diversity. By being able to use winter varieties, that gets us into growing regions that typical spring barleys don't do well or haven't done well. And so that gets us into the mid-Atlantic, is where Delaware plant is located. It also allows us to introduce winter varieties into the Southwest, where they'll do well, and we've proven they can do well. So it adds diversity to the ag community, and plus you get the added advantage or added benefit of it being a cover crop, and you have all the economic and environmental advantages that go with that. Cover crop, soil erosion, regenerative ag, as well as double cropping in the case of the Mid-Atlantic.
Right, exactly. And for some of our fans who may have seen the last Instagram Live, we talked with Trey Hill, who talked a lot about one of our growers in the Mid-Atlantic, who talked about regenerative ag. And I would point you to that Instagram Live if you want to learn more about regenerative ag. But, and this is another question, and what does it mean for a maltster to be at the center of this regional community? What kind of partnerships do we have, and what do they look like? Can you give an example?
Sure. The thought process, and one of the thought process and drivers behind Proximity Malt, was really to bring the whole chain closer together, and get the brewers in the regions that we're operating involved with the growing community, the farming community, and get the maltster involved directly with the brewers. A lot of the brewers that we're focused on are small brewers, and just haven't had that technical exchange with the people that are actually making their malt. So that allows us to do that not only with the growers but the brewers, and gets our employees involved. A good example of it is in Monte Vista, the San Luis Valley. We have a grower that grows for us that actually owns a brewery, Square Peg, and Derek came to us and said, I'd really like to brew with my barley, malt from my barley. So we worked out an arrangement with him where we actually malt his barley. He's able to take that into his brewery throughout the year, and he creates great beers with his barley grown on his farm and malted in our plant.
Excellent. What was one of the challenges that you faced when establishing Proximity Malt as a customer base for these new crops for growers in some of our regions?
Well, building two greenfield or on two brownfield sites had its own challenges in itself. But beyond that, I think from a marketing and from an ag rotation point of view, the biggest challenge I think we've had is really trying to get folks to understand who we are. You've got the traditional malting industry, the legacy malting industry, and you have craft maltsters. I think the market understood those two ends of the spectrum pretty well. But what we were creating is different. And really getting the ag community to understand that our scale is such that we can be meaningful to you on a year in, year out basis, and therefore sustainable in your rotation was key. And getting that point across took some time, but I think we're there now and building a really good network of farmers. The same thing is true with the brewers. I think a lot of brewers, when they heard of what we were doing, they thought craft malt, which is great. I mean, craft maltsters bring a lot of things to the party. But what we're doing is with our supply chain, the efficiencies of our supply chain, and the sustainability of what we're doing, and the diversity of the products that we're producing, we can be more sustainable for them from a price point.
Okay, that sounds good. Do we source 100% of our grains locally?
We endeavor to source as much of the grain as we can locally. We'll never source 100% locally just from the standpoint of risk management. It's always good to spread your risk out geographically. What we've done is pick two locations that we feel year in and year out will be consistent regional sources for us. But we do have, as by plan, secondary sources that we're originating grain. In the case of Colorado, we source the majority of our grain in the San Luis Valley, but we also originate from the Front Range, we originate from southern Wyoming, we're branching out into eastern Colorado and into Texas as well, just to spread out geographically and make sure that we don't have any quality issues from one year to the next. In the Mid-Atlantic, we have the local grain production, but we also have the ability to bring in grain competitively from outside the region, either via rail, we have rail access, or via water.
Okay. I want to take just a minute to ask if there are any questions, to please submit them, and we'll get those questions answered as we come through. We did have a question about somebody's looking for cherry smoke based malt. Sorry, we still have not.
Haven't gotten there yet, but give us some time, we'll work on it.
Right. I want to talk a little bit more now about kind of this whole thing is about sustainability and supply chain efficiency. So I want to go back to define, what do you think what is the traditional supply of malt?
You're talking about
malt.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, the traditional supply chain of malt.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to get into too much detail there, but when you look at the traditional supply chain, and it's really evolved over time, especially when you span the years that I have. But if you're looking at where the majority of the barley that's used for malting in North America and specifically the U.S. is grown, it's grown in the western states. It's grown in western North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and then a fair amount is still sourced for the U.S. out of the western prairies of Canada. The malt plants have migrated that way. Any new construction in the commercial industry has been to the west, because that's where the barley has migrated relative to competing crops. So you're looking at large plants with large scale, especially grain contracts to satisfy the overall demand of the industry. The difference between proximity and the traditional malt industry would be, as we talked about earlier, scale and then location. What we're building are secondary supply chains in areas that are very sustainable and long term.
And sustainable, you mean that it's shorter supply chain or shorter?
Well, there's two things to sustainability. One is the economics of being able to be repeatable year over year, both from a quality and a price point. One of the reasons we're able to do that is because we've freed up a lot of dollars that are locked into the traditional supply chain, which allows us to make sure that the grower is getting a fair price and return for on their acre. It allows us to market our products to the end user, the brewer, at a competitive price, and it allows obviously sustainability for Proximity Malt to be there long term.
Absolutely, and I love the part about this whole regional model about the dollars, that they really stay local.
Yeah, I mean that's really one of the big benefits is a brewer when he's buying malt from a regional source, he knows where those dollars are being spent, and he knows where the dollars are going, and they stay local, they stay in their community.
Exactly. Why should this matter to craft brewers, having a shorter supply chain?
I think it really comes down to that. I think it's the transparency that we can provide and the knowledge of the supply chain. It's always easier to understand things when you know the people that are the stakeholders involved. So when you know the folks that are growing your barley, and you know the people that are making your malt, that exchange of ideas, that exchange of managing risk is natural. We talked about the ability to keep things local. There's also the ability of control and assessment. When you're having that real-time dialogue, you can assess the quality, you can react to the quality, you can react to the dynamics of the marketplace. So, I mean, that to me all brings it back to regional, local, sustainable.
Exactly. Do you feel like we have better control over grain quality?
I think we have as good a control over grain quality as anybody in the industry, and I think you can argue that better is achievable, just simply because of our focus. We're focused on one thing only, and that's sourcing barley for the craft brewing industry, and the qualities that are required for that.
Excellent. We had a question from Matt. Why was the Semi-Works built?
Semi-Works was built just to that point in terms of quality and quality management. Is we can do product development in the Semi-Works, which replicates what we can do on our full-scale plants. We can do recipe changes. We can evaluate different qualities of barley, different varieties of barley. So it really gives our plant a good idea of what they need to do with the quality of the grain or the variety of grain that we're delivering to them ahead of putting it into full-scale production.
Excellent. Anything? Those are all my questions. Is there anything that you think I missed in asking? Anything that's important to share about?
No, well, obviously, the thing that I'm most proud of in developing Proximity Malt is the team. We have built a first-class team, second to none in the industry, and the ability to work with this talented group of people has been the highlight of my career, and it's what drives me daily. I want to thank everybody from Proximity Malt and all of our customers that are supporting us as we develop our business plan.
We had a question come in. Do you think hyper-local malt houses are viable?
I think they are. I do. I think it really comes down to what the end user is looking for. If the brewery is looking for a hyper-local supply, absolutely, they're viable.
Yeah, I think that there's been some really good work done on that level. There's a lot of maltsters who are doing really nice job.
And there's a lot of quality craft malting equipment and businesses in play out there. So yeah, I think there's definitely a viable option, or a viable space for the craft maltster.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Okay.
That's it.
All right. Well,
it's been fun.
We are going to kind of hang out for just a few minutes to make sure no other questions come in. But thank you, Dale. We really appreciate your time and explaining to this. If anyone has any questions watching this on the replay, please submit malt at proximitymalt.com. Send us your questions, and we'd be more than happy to give you some answers. So thank you, guys. Anything else? All right.
All right.
We're
Thanks.
done.